When a Pentagon lawyer can't clearly answer whether stopping reporters from speaking violates the First Amendment, it's not just a misunderstanding, it's the slow unraveling of the very Constitution they swore to protect.
Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A free press is right there in the First Amendment to the Constitution. But when Trump's federal communications chair was unhappy with some of Jimmy Kimmel's remarks, he said media companies, quote, can find ways to take action on Kimmel, or there's going to be additional work for the FCC. The next day, Secretary Hegseth announced that journalists at the Pentagon needed to sign a pledge not to report information DOD hasn't approved for release, including unclassified information. DOD reportedly rolled those rules back, but it wasn't Hegseth's first crackdown on journalists, and I worry it may not be the last. It is the job of a free press to uncover problems that DOD doesn't want people to know about, like military families living in mold-infested homes, or Secretary Hegseth texting classified war plans. Mr. Young, you were acting general counsel for DOD for most of 2025, and now you're nominated to be the Army's top lawyer. So let me ask you, Mr. Young, do you consider your oath to the Constitution to include the First Amendment?
Yes, Senator, I do.
Thank you. We need independent journalists at DOD now more than ever. President Trump has ignored locally elected leaders to deploy military forces to Los Angeles, to D.C., to Chicago, and he's told generals he wants the military to use American cities as, quote, training grounds, close quote, and handle the, quote, enemy from within. Now, this is extremely dangerous, and we need independent journalists reporting the truth, not just whatever spin Pete Hegseth wants to put on it. So, Mr. Young, would it be consistent with the First Amendment for DOD to revoke press credentials of a reporter for publishing a story that was critical of the Trump administration?
Senator, we're very cognizant and very conscientious of the First Amendment and the freedom of the press to be able to report as needed. It was my understanding that the policy was designed to inform the members of the press. The ability to access the Pentagon is a bit different than a normal public forum.
Well, I got to stop you right there. Mr. Young, I asked you a very straightforward question. I think you can answer with a yes or no. And that is it consistent with the First Amendment for DOD to revoke press credentials of a reporter just because the reporter published a story that was critical of President Trump? That should be an easy one for a lawyer who has served as you have for many years.
Yes, Senator, I would say it would be consistent with the First Amendment if the basis was that the person published information that was not otherwise approved for release by the Department of Defense. They could still be critical. We're not getting into their content, Senator.
Well, are you telling me that the new regime is that Secretary Hegseth will decide what has been released and that reporters can only talk about what the Secretary releases? That's
no, Senator, I'm
the
not.
First Amendment?
No, Senator, I'm not saying that.
Well, then let me ask my question one more time. If a reporter publishes a story critical of the Trump administration, is that grounds for revoking that reporter's press credentials?
No, Senator, it's not.
Great. Okay, hard to get there, but I'm glad we did. Let me ask you one more question, and that is, if the courts rule any of the DOD's press restrictions unconstitutional, will you stand by your oath to the Constitution and tell the military leadership to comply with court orders? Or is your plan to bend a knee to Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth?
Certainly would advise to comply with court orders.
Okay. You know, I appreciate this. Freedom of the press is a core pillar of our democracy, and the public needs to know if sending troops to war under false pretenses or if it's exposing our troops to toxic water. This is a scary moment, but there is power in raising our voice.
This wasn't just Elizabeth Warren debating a Pentagon nominee. It was a real-time test of America's constitutional pulse. What you just watched wasn't about budgets or troop movements. It was about the First Amendment, the lifeline of any democracy. When someone nominated to be the Army's top lawyer can't clearly say that journalists have the right to publish stories critical of the government. That's not confusion. That's a red flag. Warren wasn't reacting in a vacuum. She pointed to a disturbing pattern. Threats from Trump's FCC chair against members of the media, new Pentagon policies forcing reporters to sign loyalty-style agreements before doing their jobs, and internal rules that blurred the line between protecting secrets and censoring uncomfortable truths. That's not national security. That's authoritarian behavior, the kind that begins by controlling access, labeling disagreement as misinformation, and ends with the public only seeing what the government wants them to see. Warren's message was simple but powerful. The First Amendment doesn't bend for convenience. It doesn't say freedom of the press unless the administration disagrees. Its whole purpose is to protect criticism, especially when it's inconvenient, messy, or politically risky. So when Mr. Young suggested it might be consistent with the First Amendment to revoke credentials for stories not pre-approved by the Pentagon, you could almost feel the ground shake beneath the Constitution. Because under that logic, the government decides what can be published, which is exactly what state-controlled media looks like. That's not national defense. That's censorship disguised as policy. And Warren understood that. That's why she pressed harder, corner after corner, until he finally admitted that criticism alone is not a valid reason for punishment. But this hearing went far beyond one lawyer's bad answer. It revealed something deeper, a slow erosion between political loyalty and institutional integrity. When a government starts treating information as a weapon, the first casualty is the press. The real danger isn't just silenced journalists. It's the quiet acceptance of secrecy, the growing belief that truth must pass through political filters before it reaches the public, and when that happens inside the Pentagon, the most powerful institution on earth,